That night, a bat flew in the room through the open door that led onto the balcony, and through which we watched the night over the roofs of the town. It was dark in our room, except for the small light of the night over the town, and the bat was not frightened, but hunted in the room as though he had been outside. We lay and watched him, and I do not think he saw us because we lay so still. After he went out, we saw a searchlight come on and watched the beam move across the sky, and then go off. It was dark again. A breeze came in the night, and we heard the men of the anti-aircraft gun on the next roof talking. It was cool, and they were putting on their capes. Welcome to the Scorching Books discussion. Today we'll be discussing A Farewell to Arms by Ernest Hemingway. As always, I am your host, Gavin Doran. Today we will discuss one of the great pieces of literature ever written, a classic novel that puts us in the boots of an ambulance driver during World War I. We are almost able to experience the pressures and split-second decisions of war by delving into the black and white words that tell this riveting story. The experiences are even more vivid for a man, or writer, who lived them. World War I was a group of Allied powers fighting against the Central Powers. These allies included Italy, the USA, Britain, France, and Russia. The Central Powers included Germany, Austria and Hungary, the Ottoman Empire, and Bulgaria. The war took nearly 17 million lives. Just try and grasp that number, 17 million. To put that into perspective, the modern-day population of New York City is around 8.406 million people. That means that over 2 New York cities were killed during this war. 17 million people that have families and lives to return to but never went home because of the war. The men, or should I say boys, that fought in this war sometimes lied about their age in order to enlist. It is rumored that Germany had almost 250,000 underage soldiers in the fighting. Just teenagers that would run directly into the slaughter to fight for their country with bravery not found in your average person. An excerpt from the book. I looked outside. It was dark and the Austrian searchlights were moving on the mountains behind us. It was quiet for a moment, still. Then, from all the guns behind us, the bombardment started. The Lost Generation. A group of men so disillusioned and misled by the manslaughter of the Great War that they lacked a purpose in life. Ernest Hemingway was a part of this generation. Other writers that were a big part of this generation included Gertrude Stein, F. Scott Fitzgerald, and T.S. Eliot. They wrote a plethora of great books that influenced our world in a profound way. The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald gave us insight into what it was like to live in America during the Prohibition. However, we will save that novel for a later date. A man torn up by war who found a means of coping with the pain through writing. Ernest Hemingway was born July 21st, 1899 in Illinois. He worked on the school newspaper in a high school and developed the distinctive traits of his writing style that set him apart from other writers of that same time period. At the ripe young age of 19, he went overseas to fight in World War I. Hemingway served in the Italian army as an ambulance driver. He sustained injuries while serving and was sent to a hospital in Milan. While at the hospital, he fell in love with a young nurse. She accepted his proposal for marriage, but later left him for another man. One cannot ignore the similarities between the main character of A Farewell to Arms, Henry, and Hemingway's similar experiences in the war. Using these experiences and his opinion of war, Hemingway was able to craft a character. We follow this character through his experiences as an ambulance driver in the war. He struggles with the basis of morality and tiptoes a fine line between good and evil. The romantic aspect of this story provides Henry with an escape from the pressures of war. "Hello, darling," she said. She looked fresh and young and very beautiful. I thought I had never seen anyone so beautiful. To discuss the plot of the story, I'd like to bring on a Hemingway expert, Mr. Sam Jensen. Nice to have you on the show, Sam.
Good to be here.
So let's get right down to it. Sam, can you tell us a little about the setting of the book?
Well, as most readers know, this story does take place during World War I. It is set in Italy at the Italian front with the ambulance driver Henry and his rambunctious pal Rinaldi.
Let's talk about Rinaldi. How does he get his mind off the war?
Well, he does it in a bit of an unethical way. He spends a lot of time at the brothels in camp. His nights with the prostitutes are his escape from the gruesome surgery that he does to repair the wounded from the front. A surgeon from the hit TV show MASH put it this way: at this particular mobile army hospital, we are not concerned with the ultimate reconstruction of the patient. We care only about getting the kid out of here alive, enough for someone else to put on the fine touches. We work fast and we're not dainty. We try to play par surgery on this course. Par is a live patient.
Very tough job for him.
Yeah, it's clear throughout the novel that he cares for Henry and wants the best for him, even though that means letting him have to be attracted to the nurse. The priest is not a fan of these sinful actions of Rinaldi. He often gets made fun of by the guys for sticking to his ways and not resorting to the self-pleasure during war. So this difference between the two characters can almost reflect the two sides of Henry. On one side you have the evil ways of Rinaldi, and on the other side you have the morally sound ways of the priest.
Good point, Sam, good point. And when Rinaldi gives the nurse to Henry, that is a very important part of the novel. Rinaldi takes Henry to the hospital to talk to a nurse that he spotted and he was interested in. However, the nurse, whose name is Catherine Barclay, takes a liking to Henry instead of Rinaldi, and we see the blossoming of a love that will last throughout the entire novel. So, the nurse that is Catherine Barclay, she's a bit crazy, to say the least, at the beginning of the book especially. She had lost a husband already in the war, and it wears hard on her. So she tells Henry that all she is what he wants her to be. And so that is a very profound statement, considering that they had not been together very long at all. It is clear she had fallen hard for Henry, but wants to do anything to please him. That's a good point, Sam. Moving on with the storyline now, Henry is sent to the front lines to drive ambulance for people wounded in the upcoming offensive. Their camp gets shelled and Henry is hit while eating mac and cheese. But with this war came the development of many new weapons that were designed to do as much killing as possible in the most efficient way conceivable. One of the new technologies used in the war was artillery. Artillery was responsible for the majority of deaths in the war. They wiped out millions with these explosive shells. They were able to target sites up to 74 miles away. Bombardment from artillery could last weeks at a time. The guns rained hellfire down on the trenches, wiping out machine guns and any threat to the mounting infantry attack. A heavy barrage, what they called in the army, brought down nearly 50 to 60 shells per minute. That's almost a shell per second. Try and put that into your mind. And after Henry gets hit by one of these shells, he is sent to a hospital in Milan to recover from his injuries.
Now, the mac and cheese is a very important detail in Henry's injury. Later in the story, Rinaldi is lobbying to get him the silver medal, but Henry turns him down, knowing that he did nothing heroic to deserve such an honor. At this point in the story, the reader is trying to get a solid image of Henry. Is he a morally strong character, or is he an evil character? An action like this one is strong to suggest that he was trying to do the right thing.
Henry spends the rest of the summer recovering and spending time with Catherine, who ends up being a nurse at the hospital that he is at. It is at this point in the story that the love that Henry and Catherine share really starts to take hold. They begin to lose their separate lives that they have and begin to morph into one life that they spent together.
Now, in my opinion, Catherine really begins to cling to Henry in these chapters. She does not want to burden him too much, but she still spends all her free time with him. She then becomes pregnant, and Henry is sent back to the front. So we see a very passionate farewell scene that sets the stage for the reunion of the two characters that we know will take place.
Yes. After a series of unfortunate events back at the front that Henry experiences while driving an ambulance, including some mud, a shot officer, and the death of many of his fellow traveling mates, he ends up in a live or die situation. The Carabinieri, the Italian police, are shooting officers that have become separated from their groups. They recognize Henry as an officer and take him off to shoot him. But Henry sees an opportunity to escape and is faced with a run away and live, or a stay, face the charges, and get shot. He makes the decision to run, and he jumps into the river and leaves the army behind. This part of the book marks the beginning of a new Henry.
Yes, and when he hits that water, the army is gone. He is going to be no longer burdened by the stars that he cut off his sleeves. Henry is able to make it back to Catherine, who is overjoyed by his return. That joy, of course, is short-lived as they are forced to flee to avoid being arrested by authorities again. So they leave and they reach Switzerland, and the young couple begins to make a new life for themselves.
And all this builds up to the end of the book. One of the most well-written and emotional endings of a book ever concocted. Catherine goes into labor and is transported to the hospital. You can sense the nerve that Henry is feeling about the birth. Catherine gets him to leave to go get something to eat, but he soon returns to find things are not going very well. Henry is forced to make a decision that could mean life or death. After the doctor pretty much tells him that he needs to get a C-section, and the doctor darn near makes the decision for him, Catherine goes into surgery to get the baby removed.
Now, Henry is unable to watch the operation. He is so nervous about it. He paced up and down the hallway. The surgery ultimately is successful. Henry sees his new son, but frankly feels nothing towards the son. He has no feeling of love. He is very angry at the child for almost killing Catherine. And when he later finds out that the child is dead, that's why he had not really moved when Henry had saw the child.
And he wasn't really concerned about his death either, was he?
No, he wasn't.
And as the baby dies or comes out dead, Catherine's condition rapidly deteriorates. Henry goes into the room, and we sense that this is the last time that they will talk. It is very emotional. Catherine is not scared to die, but more mad that she is leaving Henry behind. Henry promises her that he will leave a special place in his heart for her. Catherine passes away, and Henry is left there alone. He was able to escape the war, but not the death and brutality of it.
Here at the end we see yet the other side of Henry. The love of his life just passed away, and he doesn't even shed a tear. We would expect a big climax of a goodbye, but instead we really get nothing. We can just walk away as if nothing ever happened. He builds up the image of a morally sound person throughout the book, but then at the end of the book he essentially shatters that image. You're left wondering if Henry is the good man you think he is, or just a cold-hearted villain.
An excerpt from the book. Now Catherine would die. That is what you did. You died. You did not know what it was about. You never had time to learn. They threw you in and told you the rules, and the first time they caught you off base, they killed you. Or they killed you gratuitously like Aimo, or gave you syphilis like Rinaldi. But they killed you in the end. You could count on that. Stay around, and they would kill you. I'd like to say thanks, Sam, for joining us here today on Scorching Books.
Yeah, thank you. Anytime, Gavin, anytime.
So, it's been 100 years since this book was published, and it's still being taught around the world. Not every day do you have a classic that outlasted decades like that. Ernest Hemingway was able to tie together a war and a burning romance into an elegant piece of literature. It intrigues the mind of every reader, constantly taking them on a whirlwind of events that ends in the most emotional way possible. Hemingway's flawless writing puts the reader in Henry's shoes, driving the ambulance, kissing Catherine, and even running from dugout to deliver some mac and cheese. An excerpt from the book. Outside, we ran across the brickyard. A shell burst near the riverbank. Then there was the one we did not hear coming until the sudden rush. We both went flat, and the flash and bump of the burst and the smell heard the singing off of the fragments and the rattle of the falling brick. Gordini got up and ran for the dugout. I was after him, holding the cheese, its smooth surface covered with brick dust. And that's it for this week's edition of Scorching Books. I'm Gavin, this is Sam. Join us next week for an enthralling discussion of Glory Field by Walter Dean Myers.
Thank you.